Hello, the internet, and welcome to my guest, Yatharth, Gupta, and Gabe Frost. Hey, guys.
Hey.
Thank you for joining us. Now, Gabe, we saw you a few months ago on Channel 10. We did a great demo of Play 2. Now, you showed us some of the really cool things Play 2 can do in Windows 7. You mentioned as part of that demo that the Windows 7 team had done a lot of work around wireless networking. So we thought we'd bring you in again for a second round, and we'd have a look at some of the wireless networking.
Right.
Now, I know from my personal experience being tech support to my friends and family that wireless networking isn't always the easiest thing. My friends have rung me before and they're like, hey, can you help me get my laptop on the wireless network? I'm having trouble. But in Windows 7, you guys have done a lot of work to address that, and hopefully it's going to be a lot easier.
Right. The networking team has done a tremendous job looking at some of the key challenges associated with wireless networks. As you pointed out, they're really hard to get set up right, especially when you're talking about devices that have limited screens and whatnot. But fundamentally, there's the underlying challenges of remembering security keys, or half the time, heck, people just connect to the network.
Sure.
And they don't even put in security keys, which leads to a bunch of problems with Yatharth we'll talk about in a second. But fundamentally, the challenges are from, not only with consumers who are having a hard time getting them back, but with retail, like the Best Buys and the Fry's of the world, and the people who make the devices, the manufacturers, like D-Link, for example, or Linksys. Whenever a consumer can't get the thing set up, that brand loyalty can be lost. I couldn't get this thing set up, so they go return it.
Yeah, they probably think, oh, well, I can't get this working, so it must be broken.
Right.
And they take it back for a perfectly working device. It's just that they couldn't work out how to get it set
And the
up.
cost is actually pretty substantial when you look at it. And so we wanted to address all of these problems, right? For consumers, most importantly, so that they have a very good experience of using Windows with their wireless devices, but also for our partners and for the retail chains out there who have to deal with this, backlog of devices that are getting returned. So the wireless networking team did a wonderful job looking at each of these particular problems and, addressing what they could in Windows, looking at the technologies that were available and creating consistent workflows so that consumers always had a single setup experience, whether they're adding a new wireless router to the network, whether they're adding a PC, a new Windows PC to their network, or even taking a device. Like in the Play 2 demo, we showed a wireless picture frame, right? So how do you make that really easy to set up and then use Play 2 or get pictures to it, for example?
So what we did was we looked at the landscape of problems. We bought a couple of these routers. We saw what's supposed to be done and what people do. There's few steps. You're supposed to buy the router. You're supposed to set it up. You're supposed to connect to it. And then an alternate thing that you do is that you connect to it later on from a different PC. We looked at these steps, and they mostly worked fine. But the problem was people weren't doing all these steps because it was difficult. Because it was different for every router. Some of them come with CDs. Some of them you got to log in and do the little geeky thing of going to the web page and setting them up. So what we found that people were doing was just buying the router and connecting to it, which is perfectly okay. I mean, it's usable, it's simple. You buy a router, you plug it in, you connect to it, but it's not secure. And there's some other problems associated with it. For example, you buy a router, you connect to it, you go to a website, things work fine, but somebody else might also be connecting to the router because it's not secure.
Right.
And now you lose bandwidth that you pay for. There is a security concern where you connect to your router and you go onto the internet, and somebody else might be connected to your router, and he might be listening to what you do. So there are several problems with leaving it unsecure.
Sure.
The people who did secure it, the people, what I would call slightly advanced users.
Power users.
Power users or people who are a little bit more patient, maybe. They put in the CD.
Okay, they put in the CD. They read
That's
the
a great
manual.
politically correct way to say that.
They're not power users.
More patient.
No.
They put in the CD, they did try to do the right thing. They put in the CD, they set it up, and the different manufacturers have different experiences. They guide you through the setup. But once that was done, they didn't know how to connect a subsequent PC to it because now they forgot their passphrase.
Sure.
The security key. You set it up and you're like, yeah, it's going to be my dog's name plus my mom's name plus my girlfriend's birthday, and 6 months later you have a different girlfriend and you don't know how to get in there.
And your dog ran away and now you got a cat.
Yes. Yeah. So, lots of problems. And what we've done is we've looked at these set of problems. We looked at different technologies that are available out there. We found a technology that fits this problem. So we focused a lot on the technology. but we also focused a lot on the experience. You know, the biggest problem for a user is a change of experience. If we ask you to do something new, how do we message that to you, right? Let's say Windows 7 did some magical stuff where you could connect to it. How would you ever know where to go in order to get there? So we looked at the experience and we tried to not change the experience from previous versions of our operating systems. We tried to take you through the same flow, however, now you get different options. And what we're going to do here is we're going to try to set this one up. We're going to try to connect to this router, set it up, and see what happens in Windows 7.
All right.
And you know, this router looks old because I've used it for a lot of demos, but it's currently in its factory state. So when you buy it and plug it in, just the power cable, this is how it would be.
Okay.
It's a D-Link router. So
and a fairly new model too. This is
yes.
Is this available to buy right now?
Yes, this is available.
Okay, but it's relatively recent.
Yes, it's a newer model. So you go to your connections folder, and you see a bunch of connections. One of them is D-Link.
And let's just go back a step too, because in order to bring up the wireless networking networks that were available to you in Windows Vista and Windows XP and previous operating systems, it wasn't just a simple matter of this wonderful little icon in the bottom right.
Well, there was quite a few clicks
that
you actually had to go through to see the wireless networks and then go through this wizard.
The biggest difference is that we did have the icon, it did look different, so we've streamlined that a little bit. But when you clicked on the icon, you'd get this dialog box, which would pop up in the center, so it would appear to you as a task or a complex problem that you're trying to solve. And just by streamlining this on the side, we've made it a little bit more simpler. And I'm going to go and try to connect to this.
So this is the router here. It's just called D-Link.
This is just called D-Link.
Okay.
I go ahead and hit connect, and this is a new prompt. It asks you, do you want to set up your network? Typically, when you try to connect to an unsecure network, it just connects to it, and you can start browsing the web. But here we've detected that this router, this Wi-Fi access point, supports the new technology called Wi-Fi protected setup.
Well, and it's more important. Importantly, it's not that it's just an unsecure network, right? It's that it's an unsecure network on a router that we know, based on this Wi-Fi protected setup protocol that happens under the scenes that consumers don't know about. We know that it's not been set up yet.
Right, so Windows 7 can tell brand new router, never been set up, and so you get this additional prompt.
Right, because you wouldn't want this to happen when you go connect to someone else's network.
Sure, or every time you connect to your own router. Okay, so brand new router, this is the prompt that we get.
So I hit OK because I do want to set up my network.
Sure.
And I get this little screen which tells me to enter the 8-digit PIN from the router label. So I'll have you read the PIN to me.
Okay.
So it shows flip the router around.
So the PIN is underneath here. Now there's quite a few numbers here, but there's one that's called WPS PIN. That's what you need?
That's the one, and that should be the only 8-digit PIN.
Okay, so that's 77802361. And I think you knew that number by heart, didn't you?
I did.
You've done that before.
Yes. So I'd go ahead and click Next. It gives my network a personalized name, which is based off my PC name. So typically people name their PCs, by their own name, /laptop, /work, whatever.
Sure.
Security, it's enabled by default. So what that means is when you set up this network, it'll be secure. And you can go in and look at the security settings if you're a power user. You can change it the way you'd like. You can have a custom passphrase. But let's not do that. Let's just go ahead and click Next. And it's talking to the router right now and setting it up for the settings that we just showed you over there. And what's going to happen is once the router is set up, it's going to reboot. We're going to connect to it, and that's going to be our secure home network.
Okay.
Moving forward. So we'll just give it a couple of seconds here.
Now, the previous system, or the previous way that you would be doing this, you would be setting up a router for the very first time. I think you mentioned before, you'd have a CD, you'd probably have a physical Ethernet cable, you'd probably have to actually connect to it, and sometimes you're running a wizard on your PC that's talking to the router, sometimes you're logging into, as you said, the website, the little web server that's built into the router itself. And this is replacing that. That now doesn't need to happen with these new devices.
That doesn't need to happen. And also what you'll note is typically when you need to use a CD or when you read instructions, 9 out of 10 routers the first thing that they ask you to do is plug in a cable.
Right.
Which kind of defeats the whole purpose of wireless, right?
Yeah, I mean, you buy a wireless router and you come home and the first thing you do is throw all your cables in the trash.
Yes.
And then it says, please connect a cable. Right. And then you kind of go, oh! Anyway, that's what I did.
So this router is now set up. It shows you your passphrase here. you can print it if you'd like. If you're a printer connected, you can print it. You can save it to a USB flash drive.
Okay.
If you'd like to, but we're going to do what most users do. Once it's set up,
And
they just
forget
move
it.
on.
Sure.
Forget it.
Like it never
Alright.
existed.
So there we are. We're connected to our network. The network's saved.
Okay.
So if I shut this laptop down and goes to Starbucks, connect to a network there, come back home, I'll automatically connect back to this.
Okay. Cool.
But this was setting up the router and connecting to it. Now, your girlfriend comes home and she'd like to connect to this, and you don't remember the passphrase.
Of course.
Because it was complex, it was auto-generated.
It was.
And so let's see what happens. So I'm going to run a little command here, and what that does